I was lying on the beach, drink in hand, watching the waves crash when my phone buzzed. It was from my mom. The text was short, strangely short, in hospital. Don't worry. That was it. No details. No context. Just those 4 words. My heart skipped. My mom isn't dramatic, but she's vague. And she has a history of sending texts that make mountains out of molehills. Once, she wrote, "Emergency. Call ASAP." When I rushed to phone her, it turned out she just needed help resetting her Wi-Fi router. So this time, sitting there under the sun, my stomach knotted. Part of me wanted to dial her instantly. The other part whispered, if it was serious, she'd call. If it was life or death, someone else would reach out. And then another thought crept in. Do I even owe her this call? Our relationship isn't simple. My mom thrives on guilt. She's the kind who measures love in sacrifices. Miss one phone call, skip one holiday, and she'll bring it up for years. I'd spent my entire life being the dutiful child, racing to her side at every vague text, every crisis. But I was tired. And I was on vacation with my girlfriend, our first trip together in years. So I didn't call. Instead, I sent back a cautious text. What happened? Are you okay? She didn't reply. Hours passed. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay. I told myself, if she's typing, she's fine. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages. Not from her, but from my brother. WTF, you didn't call Mom. She was in the air all night. She said she texted you and you ignored her. Do you even care about her at all? My hands shook as I scrolled. My brother's anger was scorching through the screen. He accused me of being selfish, heartless, too wrapped up in my own life to care if our mom was dying. That's when I found out the truth. My mom had fainted at home. A neighbor found her and drove her to the ER. She'd been monitored overnight. Nothing life-threatening, low blood sugar, dehydration, but still, it was a hospital stay. And she had told everyone who would listen that I didn't even call. Now my family looks at me differently. At dinner last weekend, my aunt muttered under her breath, "Some children only love their mothers when it's convenient." My cousin told me I should be ashamed. Even my grandmother sighed and said, "I didn't raise you to ignore your own blood." I tried to explain that I needed boundaries, that I can't keep dropping everything for texts that may or may not mean anything. But in their eyes, the damage was done. And the deepest cut. A week later, my mom herself looked at me and said softly, "You showed me where I stand in your life." That sentence hasn't left my head since. So now I'm left asking myself, was I cruel for not calling, or was her vagueness the real betrayal? Because when I think back, it feels less like an emergency and more like a trap. A test I was destined to fail. At first, I told myself I could weather the storm. Families gossip, people take sides, and eventually they move on. But with this, they didn't. Every interaction with my family turned into a judgment. My brother stopped inviting me over for Sunday dinners. My aunt, who had always treated me like her second child, suddenly found excuses not to see me. And my mom? She perfected the art of silent punishment. She would pick up the phone when I called, but her voice was clipped, her sentences short. When I visited, she would sigh heavily and say things like, "Don't worry, I won't bother you with my problems anymore." It felt less like I had made a mistake and more like I had been cast as the villain in a story she was determined to tell. Then I stumbled across something that made my stomach churn. My cousin tagged my mom in a Facebook post. Some children forget who held them when they were sick, who gave them everything, and who would sacrifice it all for them. Don't forget your mother. She won't be here forever. The comments section was full of sympathy for her. People wrote things like, "Stay strong. You deserve better, and it's heartbreaking when kids grow up and forget. And of course, she liked every comment. It wasn't just family anymore. She was broadcasting the story publicly. My child abandoned me in the hospital. The worst part, she never corrected the narrative. Not once did she tell anyone that she had been vague, that she'd written only 4 words, that I had texted back immediately. She left those details out, deliberately. One night, my brother called me, his voice shaking with anger. "You don't get it, do you? She cried for hours saying she's alone in this world. Do you know what it's like to hear your own mom say she doesn't think her child cares if she dies?" I snapped. For the first time, I let all the frustration out. Do you know what it's like to be manipulated for years? Every time she wants attention, she sends half-truths and expects me to jump. I can't live my life like that anymore. I'm tired of being tested. There was silence on the other end. Then my brother whispered, "So you're admitting it? You chose your vacation over mom." And he hung up. That night, I lay awake replaying everything. And a sickening thought crawled into my head. What if she did this on purpose? What if she wanted me to fail? Because the timing was too perfect. She knew I was on vacation. She knew my phone service was spotty. She knew I'd be torn between guilt and exhaustion. And she sent that vague text, not a call, not specifics, just enough to trigger panic, but not enough to give me clarity. Almost like she wanted me to hesitate. Almost like she wanted proof that I wasn't the perfect child. The next day, I confronted her. I asked why she hadn't just called me. Why she hadn't explained what happened. Why she let everyone believe I ignored her when she knew the truth. Her face hardened. Because if you loved me, you wouldn't need details. You'd drop everything and call. But you didn't. It hit me then. This wasn't about the hospital. It wasn't even about health. It was about control. About her need to measure love in how quickly I bend to her will. And when I finally didn't, she painted it as betrayal. Now, I feel like I'm at war with my own family. They see me as the selfish child, the one who failed her in her time of need. Meanwhile, I'm left questioning if I can ever untangle myself from her grip. Because how do you fight a betrayal that isn't about lies or cheating, but about rewriting the story of your love into a weapon she can use against you? Weeks turned into months, and the tension at home didn't fade. It metastasized. My mom never directly confronted me again about the hospital text, but her disapproval hung in the air like smoke. Every word I spoke was measured, every action scrutinized. I felt their judgment before it even crossed anyone's lips. Family dinners became minefields. A misplaced comment or even a small smile could be twisted into proof of my selfishness. Then came the real blow. I received an email, not from my mom, not from my brother, but from the family group chat. It was a chain of messages in which my mother had meticulously documented my supposed failures, my neglect, my emotional absence. Each paragraph framed me as the child who abandoned her in a critical moment. She even attached copies of my vague text responses, stripping away context, as if that alone proved my guilt. I stared at the screen, frozen. It wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore, it was a calculated public shaming campaign within the family. I tried reasoning. I sent private messages to my siblings. "You don't know the whole story." I responded. I asked if she was okay. "The details matter." But my brother replied coldly, "We don't need your excuses. Mom was scared and you weren't there. That's enough for us." Even my aunt, who I thought had always understood me, blocked my messages. Then, in a move that crushed me entirely, my grandmother called me one evening. Her voice was soft but firm. "Your mother is hurt, and the family feels you abandoned her. Until you show remorse, You won't be welcome at family gatherings. We need to support her, not defend you. It was official. My family had taken sides. I felt like I was watching my life unravel in slow motion. I wasn't allowed to defend myself, explain, or show that my intentions weren't malicious. Every attempt to clarify was framed as arrogance or justification. Every piece of evidence I offered was twisted to reinforce their narrative. And then came the gaslighting. During a rare visit, my mom casually remarked, "I guess you don't care about anyone but yourself, do you?" When I protested, she shook her head, almost pitying me. "Don't even try to tell me otherwise. I've seen your heart." I began doubting myself. Maybe I had been selfish. Maybe I had abandoned her emotionally all these years without realizing it. But deep down, I knew the truth. The betrayal wasn't mine. It was hers. Not the fainting or the hospital stay, that was real, but the way she weaponized it, using vague communication, half-truths, and selective storytelling to paint me as the villain. And the worst part, I couldn't escape it. Even when I tried to limit contact, my mother found ways to leak stories to extended family, friends, anyone she could reach. Every birthday, every holiday, every social gathering became a test. Would they scold me? Avoid me? Whisper behind my back? And if I showed any joy, any independence, it was twisted into evidence of my cruelty. I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just fighting resentment or anger anymore. I was fighting a system, a network of manipulation that had been perfected over decades. One text, one vague cry for attention, and suddenly my life was upended. And because everyone sided with her, there was no safe space for me to defend myself. It was betrayal on a scale I'd never imagined. Not just personal, not just emotional, but systemic. I started planning my escape. My vacation had already been a glimpse of freedom, the sun, the ocean, the world outside their judgment. I began thinking about moving, cutting ties, building a life where my actions weren't constantly twisted into sin. But the thought of leaving them, even when they were clearly toxic, tore at me. Because despite everything, I loved them. And even as I acknowledged the betrayal, I mourned the family that no longer existed, the one that had raised me, that had celebrated my milestones, that had once seemed safe. I was trapped between guilt and self-preservation. Between love and betrayal. Between the person they believed I was and the person I knew myself to be. And I realized, painfully, that the hardest betrayal wasn't the hospital text, the vague warning, or even the family turning against me. It was the realization that some people, even those closest to you, can weaponize love itself, and there's nothing you can do to stop it.